Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. This is going back to my favorite time period, the 1990s. This week we're on episode number 51. I just want to thank everybody who took the time to thank me for wish me luck and go on future of. I got to 50 episodes last week. That was pretty cool. But we're continuing on this week. Didn't have anything like special for last week for the 50th episode. I mean, there's no sense of like editing a bunch of stuff together when you can just watch the episodes, Plus, if I had that kind of time, I would obviously put more into this. It's just me talking to a camera with a little microphone here. But anyway, we're on episode number 51. And I didn't want anybody to think like, oh, I don't put any effort into this. I have so much, other things that I've got to do that I don't have like, plus I don't have like the editing software and stuff to come up with all this elaborate stuff and green screens and videos to go along with it and everything. And plus, if I was adding clips and stuff at one point, but that stuff ends up getting like copyright crap. I'd just rather do this and know that it's not going to get taken down, because you know how YouTube is with their fickle copyright stuff. You never know what, or even what you say. There's certain words that you don't even know if you'll get banned for, and it's not even offensive words, it seems. Anyway, on that tangent, we're on episode 51 this week. We're going to go back to June of 1991. This is our fourth trip through 1991. I was 7 years old at this time, and I just finished first grade, so let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins, tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Yeah, we're definitely working our way through 1991 here. Our bonus episode, I do want to mention before we get into this actual episode, bonus episode will be coming out, let's see, this releases Wednesday, October 22nd. Well, our bonus episode will come out October 30th. It's a Thursday, day before Halloween. And, of course, it's a theme. It's all about my top horror anthology movies and TV shows. I do a top 10 list for both. Again, it's my personal preferences. You guys may not have heard of some of them or don't agree with some of the choices. That's completely fine. And, it's sort of made like not to make you argue, but just kind of make you think like, oh yeah, I like that. That's a good. I wouldn't have put that there, or I never even heard of that, or that show's stupid, or that movie sucks. Kind of get your mind going. But I've actually thought ahead already to Halloween of next year. I mean, assuming I'm still here and everything. All right, the theme from Crash Bandicoot. That's my ringtone, because it's a whole thing with my wife. Just the theme on the PS4 is the Crash Bandicoot theme, so the song plays. Every time it's on, I start dancing to it. And she mutes it so I can't dance to it anymore. Well, you can't stop me now. Well, I guess ending can. Hey, Crash Bandicoot from the 90s. Anyway, I've already thought ahead of what next year's bonus episode for October will be, because I definitely want to keep those Halloween themed. But I'm going to do my top, I don't know what number it'll be, but top horror franchises. The only qualifications for that is, for a franchise, I think, like in my mind, for something to be a franchise, it has to at least have 3 movies. Just a movie and a sequel to me don't really make it a franchise. But anyway, that's next year. Bonus episode next week will be the horror anthology. But you're not here for next week, next year, next century. You're here for right now. Although, technically, you're not here for right now. You're here for years and years and years ago. 30 plus now. Going back to June 1991. Speaking of horror, though, we're going to start with one of my favorite things to talk about, that I only talk about it when episodes air the month I'm talking about, which luckily it does here. We actually start season 3 of it. It's Tales from the Crypt. Season 3, one of the best seasons they've had. They released 5 episodes in this month of June of 1991, and I know you're like, how did they get 5? There's about 5 weeks in June. No, but they did, sometimes with Tales from the Crypt, they would do, when they premiered, they would do 3 episodes all at once. So the first 3 episodes aired the first night, and then you'd get 2 more throughout the month. But let's talk a little bit about them, not go into huge detail. But like I said, all 5 of these episodes actually made my top 40 list of Tales from the Crypt episodes, which you can catch that bonus episode. That was a couple months ago. I think it's episode 11, I think. And that's actually in 4 parts, too, by the way. I did, because I included the Crypt Keeper intro and outros. So that would be a 4, 5, maybe even 6-hour video if I'd have done that all together. First I thought it was going to be 1. Then I was like, I'll break it into 2. Then it ended up breaking into 4. But anyway, episode number 1 of season 3 was called Love to Death. It was number 32 on my top 40 list. And it was originally from the Tales from the Crypt comic book, of course from the 50s, number 25. And this is about a man who is he's a screenwriter or a wannabe screenwriter. He's like in love with this woman that's like an actress that lives in his apartment building, and he like recognizes her from things. And like she won't give him the time of day and is like mean to him, and he's like obsessed with her. So this creepy apartment manager that lives there, he's like, I noticed you've been falling for her and she ain't doing it. Give her a drop of this. And there's ESPN in their high-priced service app. Sorry, I got my ringer on for some reason. But yeah, he noticed he gave her this. I'm gonna try again. He gave the guy this love potion, and she takes it and just becomes completely obsessed with him, and literally he's trying to screw his brains out. Sorry to be graphic there, but like he can't get any work done because she's always wanting to do it with him, and just completely hanging all over him, and like it's what he wanted. But then when it happened, obviously what he wanted was her to fall in love with him and not be like obsessive. But that didn't happen. But obviously this apartment I say secret apartment manager because like people normally just drop off the rent. He got to go into the room and it's like all these cameras set up because he's watching everything all the time. But his main reason for doing that is just he likes causing trouble apparently, because he knew it would happen. So then he gives him a potion to kill her, which again he puts it in her drink, but he like walks out of the room. And she's like, silly me. And then, because I guess the glass that he was going to drink had a smudge on it. So she switched him and he didn't know it. So he ends up taking the potion and dying. And he's like in the afterlife of wherever he's supposed to be at. You'd think it'd be hell, but it looked more like heaven. I doubt he'd be there for that. But he's like, finally I'm going to get some peace. And then she comes in with her face all half messed, torn up. Because once he died, she couldn't take it anymore and jumped off the roof of the building they lived in. Now we can be together forever, and it just kept going as the scene kind of faded out, and he's like screaming no. He got exactly what he deserved. Episode number 2 is called Carrying Death, which I've heard there's 3 versions of this. There was a version that they did for like the Tales from the Crypt radio show, which was like short-lived in the early 2000s. There was the comic book version, and then there's the TV show version. I actually prefer the TV show version the best. It was number 8 on my top 40 list. It's originally from the comic book Shock Suspense Stories, number 9. There's Crash again. But, shut up, Crash. Shock Suspense Stories was another one of the EC comics, which Tales from the Crypt, of course, became known as the main title. But it was, by the title of it, wasn't exactly, they did do horror stuff, but it was more in the shocking, shock suspense stories. But it's about this man, this criminal named Diggs. It's his last name because Creepy was like, poor Diggs. But
You got mail.
Yes, AOL. You got mail. By the way, I never had AOL back in the 90s. Like some people have those fond memories, the AOL Messenger and everything, because I never even was able to get on the internet then. I never experienced AOL till like the mid 2000s. Sorry for the offshoot here, but by then it was like mostly robots responding. Of course, me being an early 20-year-old, I was hormones. I was looking for a girl on there. I got mostly freaking robots and stuff like that. But anyway, I didn't get to experience the heyday of AOL Messenger. Sorry. I think that's the only other scene. Oh no, if somebody sends me a message on Facebook, it's going to be the Dragon Zord flute, which 1991 Power Rangers weren't out yet. So hopefully we don't get a Dragon Zord. But anyway, Sorry. Back to Carrie and Death. This criminal named Diggs, he's on the run and going through the desert, and the cop catches up with him and like handcuffs himself to him. Well, he ends up shooting the cop, and the cop is like knows he's dying, so he swallows the handcuff key. Like as the last, screw you to this guy. Now what are you gonna do? Well, he ends up having to drag this cop off in the desert, and of course there's no water, there's no nothing. He's trying to get to Mexico. I think he is. Because he's got money. I've got, like I said, there's 3 versions of this story throughout history, so I'm trying to keep track of the exact details of the TV version, because I hear the audio version all the time. It plays on my Halloween playlist, but the TV version I actually haven't seen in a couple of years. I need to. I've got the whole set. But anyway, he's dying of like dehydration, and this cop's connected to him, and he has no way to get it off there. So he finds this rock and he sharpens it, and like goes to hack his the cop's hand off, so he can at least be away from the freaking 200-pound body he's having to drag literally up a mountain. He ends up like getting like confused, ends up hacking into his own hand, and he's like hanging off, and then this buzzard that's been following him the whole time, carrion as in the bird. I get once his hand rips off, he falls down off the mountain. He's finally free, but he's like laying there. It's all nasty. His neck's all twisted, and he's paralyzed, and he's like laying there dying as the bird pecks his eye out. Really cool visual on that one. Number 3 is called The Trap. It was number 5 on my top 40 list. Originally from, again, Shock Suspense Stories. This time number 18. And this episode has a cameo and was directed by Michael J. Fox. Again, Tales from the Crypt had a lot of good big not horror, but just big names that, like, Tom Hanks was a special, was like a couple seconds in an episode and directed one. They had big-time actors that wanted to do, the small roles, because, it's a half-hour, something like that show. It's not even normally a half hour, it's a little bit less. And, either acting or directing in it, because, they don't get the chance to do that kind of stuff. Normally they're in movies, they're doing this for months, they're, learning their lines, planning for the movie. They don't normally get to do TV stuff, because, that's another thing where you do TV episodes, you're in it for the season, you're there all the time, These are like we were talking about earlier about anthologies. This is an anthology show. Obviously, this is going to be my number 1 anthology show. There's no shock there. But anyway, Michael J. Fox was in this one. It's about a guy who's like mean to his wife, and can't keep a job, and they need money, so he decides he's gonna, cash in his life insurance policy. Well, how do you do that? She's like, if you cash it in now, we'll have near the. There's Crash again. Shut up. Alerts, fantasy football and stuff. Set my lineup. I know, it's freaking Tuesday. I ain't gotta set it yet. Anyway, after Crash is done, back to this guy. There's a Facebook alert. Now you've heard them all except the Dragon Zord. But anyway, and I change them every day, by the way. It annoys the crap out of my wife. But anyway, like I said, back to The Trap. 3rd episode of the month. It's about a guy who wants to collect on his life insurance. As Crypt Keeper says, who wants to collect on his life insurance policy without dying in the process. And of course, his brother just happens to be a coroner, so they fake his death. They tell his brother and his wife tell him to move to, go down to Mexico while they're waiting, while they get the money and things cool down, so it's not obvious, and have some plastic surgery done. Which, by the way, you don't look that much different with the plastic surgery. Meanwhile, there's a scene where he's like laying there getting ready because they're gonna have him cremated. Getting ready to be cremated. He's like laying on the thing, and the wife and the husband's brother start making out on top of the coffin because his brother, the coroner, is like, I don't like the way he treats you, because he is an abusive piece of crap, and the brother's nice, and it's like keeps going into their mom's life savings to give it to him, but the mom blames the good brother on it. But anyway, they're making out on top of it, and they sit up when the mom comes in screaming because she's crazy anyway, and the body's about to, it's going down the thing, and the two are like, they're like, he's alive. Like, they didn't like him, but they didn't want him to like burn up alive, because he probably would have started screaming. But the mom, they could barely get the mom out of the room and stop the thing right before he's about to be cremated. Anyway, like I said, he moves to Mexico, gets the face change. This waiter like annoys him. Another beautiful sunset. And at first he's like with it, like, yeah, it is. And at the end he's like, shut up. Anyway, the wife and brother don't move to Mexico like they're supposed to. So, and they stop taking his calls. So he comes back, shows up, and they pretend they don't know who he is. Because, like I said, he's had plastic surgery. Like, to me, he looks the same. But I guess in the movie, to everybody else, he looks different. Or the show, he looks different. So, what ends up happening in the weird Tales from the Crypt twist of fate way, he ends up getting, because his blood is on the fire poker that he hit himself with, to kill himself. They test his DNA. And he ends up getting charged with his own murder, basically. And ends up getting put in the electric chair and put to death. And then the brother and his wife moved to Mexico. And that same waiter's like, another beautiful sunset. But yeah, like, Tales from the Crypt and their twist endings are just so brilliant. Like, and they came up with the stuff in the 50s, too, Obviously, these stories were based on the comic books. And they changed a lot in them, as I've seen, because I've been reading through Tales from the Crypt. I've got like the third archive book. Each one has six editions in it, 6 issues, whatever you want to call it. So I've read some of these that have been on TV, and there's a whole lot of difference, because between 50s and now, plus the stuff they can put on HBO, they couldn't put in a kid's comic book even then. As bad as they said those comic books were and led to juvenile delinquency, which they didn't, but that's what basically got EC Comics shut down. But as bad as that was, they didn't have anything like they had on it, because they could do anything they wanted basically on HBO. Episode number 4 was called Abracadaver. It was number 9 on my top 40 list, and it was originally in Tales from the Crypt, issue number 37. And it's about these two brothers studying to be doctor, and one of them throws a surprise birthday party for, I guess, the older brother. He's slightly older. And these two look nothing alike as brothers, but we're supposed to believe they are. But anyway, the surprise party is like a bunch of like people from his class, his friends and stuff, like dress up as zombies and they go into the morgue at night. And anyway, it scares the guy, and then he's laughing, but then he ends up having a heart attack. And I don't know if it was a heart attack or stroke or something, but later on, like, he can barely move his arms, so I'm guessing it was a stroke, maybe both. But he didn't end up becoming the doctor he wanted to be, because of his physical limitations, because of the heart attack stroke thing, I'll call it. So he's like down in the lab, doing experiments. Meanwhile, his brother, which couldn't hardly pass anything on his own, ends up becoming like one of the people in charge of the whole hospital. And he's always on his brother about researching. He's like, yeah, I wouldn't be down here if you hadn't done that to me. He's like, you'll never let me forget about that. Well, anyway, his brother been testing out this drug, and he tells him that he's gonna kill him, and his whole theory is your brain still functions after death for a while. So he ends up giving this medicine, which his brother doesn't know about, but he's tricking his brother into thinking he's dead. It only paralyzes him, but he's completely aware of everything going. So he thinks he's being hung on a meat hook, and he's about to have his autopsy. There goes Crash again. He's about to have his autopsy. I'm going to give an autopsy to my phone. He comes awake from the medicine, and he's like, yeah, I didn't really kill you. It's just a suspenso. I can't remember what it's called. But it's this medicine that, like, preserves the heart if you've had, like, a traumatic event, like a heart attack or something, so you don't die. But anyway, apparently the medicine didn't work well because it ends up causing a heart attack, and the brother actually dies. And at the end, he's like, you were right about everything. Your brain does function, except the one thing you were wrong about, the sense of touch isn't the first thing to go, it's the last. And he screams as they saw into his head. Great episode. And then number 5 is another good one. Top Billing. It was number 30 on my top 40 list. Originally from the Vault of Horror, which is, of course, another EC comic book, hosted by the Vault Keeper. Which, if you haven't read the comic books, but you've seen the Tales from the Crypt Keeper seasons 2 and 3, the cartoon, the Vault Keeper and the Old Witch, they're on there. That was Vault of Horror number 39. And it's about a actor that's like down on his luck. His agent fires him. His girlfriend's leaving him. He's getting thrown out of his apartment. Like, all this happening at once. And he meets up an old, it was a one-time friend, roommate. But they were like fighting each other for the guy's girlfriend who just left him for somebody else. But they were both actors, and this one guy's like the handsome actor. He's getting all these movie and commercial roles. Meanwhile, it's played by John Lovitz, so you could picture him. I'm not saying he's ugly, but John Lovitz is John Lovitz, so he's not the classic actor look. So he ends up, they end up like I'll show you, what real acting is about. To go, and they're going to try out for this Hamlet play, and they're laughing at or the other guy's laughing at where the location is. I guess it's a bad part of town. But anyway, they go to try out, and Hamlet's a serious role, and they end up hiring. The other guy ends up showing up, just like, I'm just going to prove a point to you, and they end up hiring him. He's like, the director is crazy anyway, which you'll find out even more crazy. The director's like, he has the look, and he's like, I can't even get in freaking Hamlet because of the look. So he just snaps and decides to kill his, I guess, former friend. He's not friend now, obviously, the other actor. He ends up killing him, strangling him to death, I think. I think it's what he does. Anyway, they're like, where'd your friend go? Like, oh, he must have left. He had stage fright. And then he's like, I can be the part. He's like, no, you're all wrong. And then they ended up using him for the part, but the part wasn't like the Hamlet. I can't remember the character's name. I said this in my bonus episode. But the skull, then that's what the part was for. Because right before the guy was killed, the other actor, the good-looking actor, he read the name tag and he was like, what the hell? He was saying that and then got killed. Well, if he would, the John Lovett's character idiot would have taken the time to read what the character was for and realized that they were just using him for literally the look. There was the skull. He would have gotten out of there. Anyway, he ends up finding out this ain't a theater group. This is literally a mental home where the patients have killed all the people, the orderlies and everything, and the police show up at the very end because I guess they've been trying to get a hold of him for a while, but too late. They didn't save John Lovitz and his skull, and at the end you see like his skin and stuff and hair outside the building, and a dog runs off with it. But those are just some great Tales from the Crypt episodes. I really love those. Kind of sticking in the vein of entertainment, we're going to talk about movies now. 3 movies came out this month that I liked. One I haven't seen a whole lot of, and 2 I've seen a bunch and own on DVD. The first one is Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I don't think I seen this until 2001 or something like that. It's got Christina Applegate, of course. Kelly Bundy from Married with Children is probably her most famous role. But yeah, it's just a crazy movie about the babysitter dying, and just this it's if I remember, from what I remember, it has comedy elements to it, but it's not slap. That sounds like a slapstick premise there, where the babysitter's dead and all this hijinks go on. It has a little more of a serious tone, if I remember. I need to watch it again because I'm not I'd maybe see it once or twice. There's literally yesterday was my first. You're gonna be surprised. Was my first time watching E.T. My wife finally got me to watch it, and it wasn't like I avoided it. It's just something I'd never watched, and it was a really good movie. I wish I would have seen it before. It was a lot of people's childhood favorites and have great memories, but me, born in 1983, didn't see E.T. until October 20th of 2025. Okay, don't ask me why. Anyway, our second movie is the cinema masterpiece by the greatly trained actor Hulk Hogan, Suburban Commando. And I actually love this movie. It's so funny. He plays a freaking this bounty hunter from space, and he's got to go to Earth, recharge his ship, and looking for a place to live, and he moves in with these people, and this guy is has a family there, and meanwhile the guy he tried to kill in space before, when his ship got damaged, he had the hit out on him. Hogan was trying to kill him as the bounty hunter, was ended up coming to Earth because the guy that lived at the house followed the Hogan character. I can't remember what his name is. Followed him to this warehouse where a spaceship was at, and he ended up getting in there. And by the guy was it? Oh jeez, I don't want to get this wrong. Christopher Lloyd, unless he was the guy in Mr. Nanny. I get that confused. No, I think the guy Mr. Nanny was a different dad. I think Christopher Lloyd was Christopher Lloyd was the dad in this. Anyway, he finds a spaceship and turns stuff on, and the stuff was supposed to be on like a super low charge so it didn't attract the bad guys from space. Well, bad guys from space ended up coming, and just a bunch of crazy stuff. Other bounty hunters showed up to go after Hogan, or not. I don't know if they were bounty hunters or just bad guys, but played by Brutus Beefcake and the Undertaker. When they talked, they had like baby voices, and at one point Undertaker he has like rocket shoes on, comes up through the toilet and has a toilet seat around his head. And this is like pre-WWF Undertaker. This was right after he left WCW as Mean Mark Callis, so he was like in between. And he would go to the WWF, of course, later on. June 1991 is when this came. I think he'd been in Survivor Series already. Was it? I'm confused now. I think Undertaker debuted in 90, not 91. I'm going to look it up real quick. But anyway, great movie. And like I said, I'm going to look this up real quick. But my other movie to talk about is The Naked Gun 2.5. The Smell of Fear. Leslie Nielsen, The Naked Gun movies are just so great. The new one just came out. It's supposed to be like Leslie Nielsen, Frank Drebin as the character's name. It's supposed to be his son. I haven't watched it yet. It's on Paramount. I just need to. Like I said, I've been busy with a lot of stuff. Yes, it took my computer that long just to get Google up. Yeah, 1990. So he'd been in there already, but the movie was filmed before then. So that had to be weird coming out with, like, obviously wrestling fans are going to watch a movie with Hogan in it. But it had to be weird seeing, like, Undertaker in this movie is, it kind of goes against his character, especially the Undertaker character. But anyway, back to the Naked Gun movie. I don't remember the exact plot of this because a lot of them run together to me. But, Leslie Nielsen, the crazy cop. O.J. Simpson was in this. He was always getting killed in these movies, which is kind of ironic. But just it's a certain type of comedy. If you don't like, I don't know. Some people consider this stupid humor because it's got stuff that just does not make any sense. But it's not stupid humor to me as in like a Napoleon Dynamite type movie where quesadilla or quesadilla or however he said it in that movie. Just stuff like that, like, and Will Ferrell movies to me is just like, I don't like those movies. I call them dumb comedies. This is like a dumb comedy, but in like an intentional way, a slapstick, like, crazy way. I love the freaking Naked Gun movies and Leslie Nielsen. I know all the stuff he was in. He almost played the same type of character. Even in Mr. Magoo, when he's playing Mr. Magoo, he's basically playing Leslie Nielsen as Mr. Magoo. But I love that movie. For some reason, I only own that one. I need to get the first and the third one. And like I said, I need to see the third one. But a little bit of news, just to talk about it, because it was released this month. Microsoft released MS-DOS, or DOS, or however you say it. I always said DOS, 5.0. And Windows was actually already in use at the time, too. I was surprised to learn Windows started in the 80s. 85, actually, was the first Windows. But they were on Windows 3.0. And the differences between the two systems, if you don't know, MS-DOS was basically like text-based. Where, Microsoft Windows, and they're both produced by Microsoft. But Windows had, the icons you click on, and the programs that open. With MS-DOS, you had to know, like, coding where, a registry thing would come up like you sometimes see on Windows now. You'd have to type in a command to bring up something, and you'd have to either memorize the commands or have them written down or on a program. But you have to memorize basically the commands, and you could only have like one thing open at a time. Whereas opposed to Windows, which now it's like nuts. But I mean back then you could have more than one thing open at a time. But yeah, that came out in June of 1991, and I remember my mom had a MS-DOS computer, when you put the discs in, and it was the black screen with like the green text on it, just completely different environment of what the internet would end up becoming. And then, I guess weird fact of the month, we'll call it, the body of the 12th president of the United States, Zachary Taylor, was exhumed because I guess for years there'd been rumors that he was died of arsenic poisoning. Crash didn't do it. He was in space. But I don't know like what made them finally like, we're going to exhume his body. But they did, and they didn't find any evidence of it. I don't know if it was because he'd been dead for 100 years, 100, 200 years, or just because they ruled it out. I don't know, but just weird fact of the day I found out when researching June of 1991. Just the rumors got so bad they had to do something about it. Who were they going to punish if he was? The great-great-great-great-grandchildren of whoever did it? I don't even know if they had a suspect. But anyway, we're going to talk about video games here briefly. The top selling game of the month was Super Mario Bros. 3 for Nintendo. Of course, one of a lot of people's favorite Mario game. My favorite collection, I guess you'd say, was the Super Mario All-Stars, which had probably my favorite Mario game on it, Mario 2. That's my favorite. But it had 1, 2, 3, The Lost Levels, and Super Mario World. But anyway, Super Mario Bros. 3 is a lot of people's favorite game. Of course, it had the raccoon tail and the map you could go around this time. I think it was the first time it had a map on it, and all this bonus stuff. It was really cool. It was the #1 selling game for definitely a few months in 1991. And it was 2 months later that they released Super Nintendo, so they're getting ready to come out with Super Mario World. But, so this is like near the end life of...
You've got mail.
I don't. Well, I do technically, but anyways, near the end of the Super Mario Bros. 3 game, but it was still outselling everything. Until a little game that was released this month came out called Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Genesis. And it became, Sega's everything. Their mascot. So many games are made of it. Two of my favorite games of all time, Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 for Dreamcast, obviously wouldn't exist without Sonic, the very first Sonic existing. Where Nintendo had the side-scrolling thing, where Sega said, here, let's take that and put it on crack, basically, because it was like super fast, and I got motion sickness and all kinds of stuff like that. So actually playing those games today gives me a headache. I didn't get to play them in their heyday, and I probably wouldn't have liked it because, like I said, it gives me a headache. I hate it because I love the Sonic franchise and would love to be able to enjoy those games like everybody else seemed to from my generation. It's just I end up getting a headache because it goes so fast. Love Sonic Pinball though, or Sonic Spinball, sorry, for Sega Genesis. That's one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog released in June of 1991, and the Sega Genesis beat the Super Nintendo. Both were 16-bit, but Sega Genesis came out before Super Nintendo. I think it kind of put a rush on the Super Nintendo because I don't think Nintendo was ready to let go of their original system yet. But released in the mid '80s, it was about time. But it really showed off what their blast processing did, which was basically a term Sega used for their, because their games were faster. I don't think there was actually such thing as a blast processor. That's just what they called it. And it worked. People believed it. They're like, we got to get this. It has blast processing. They don't even know what it means. But yeah, of course, the legendary Sega versus Nintendo rivalry started right then. Basically, that was really, this Genesis coming out was one thing, but that Sonic game really put it into high gear. And of course, with going forward, then when they would sell Sega Genesis, no matter what generation it was, usually Sonic the Hedgehog came packed in with it. But now we're going to talk about Saturday morning cartoons and our Saturday Nickelodeon schedule. I've chosen a random date of the month. It happened to be a Saturday, so we're talking about Saturday morning cartoons again. June 22nd of 1991. If you were like me and everybody else, if you were around then, school was out, so I won't have the TGIF schedule because they were on reruns and stuff. I normally only give the, when they're in the actual season. But, if you were me, you were definitely watching Saturday morning cartoons all the time. And Nickelodeon if you had cable. But yeah, we'll go to June of 1991, of course. The four networks that were around the time: ABC, CBS, Fox Kids, I think, started that year. If not the year before. I think it was 91. And then NBC, which has never been my favorite of Saturday morning stuff. But we'll start with ABC. The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, I really wasn't a fan of. The Wizard of Oz, I never watched that cartoon, but I'd seen clips of it. Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters. That's another one of them. I've seen the Ghostbusters, but I'm just not like the biggest fan of it. Not that I hate it. It's just, it's not my cup of tea. So I never really watched the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. I know, shoot me now. But at 10, we got Beetlejuice, the animated series, which I loved. Which, here's another surprise. I don't like the Beetlejuice movie. I didn't really care for it. And I've never seen the one they came out with recently. But I love the Beetlejuice cartoon. Go figure. Then we got New Kids on the Block, because of course they had a cartoon series. I never watched it because, I wasn't into that type of music, so I never would have watched it. Then we've got, for an hour, we got the Bugs Bunny and Tweety Show, another variant of Looney Tunes that they give the slap a name on, and, not saying it's a bad thing, it's just they did that so much, I've gone on and on before about all the different variations of Looney Tunes and names of that give the cartoons, and it's just, some of it's just the same old cartoons. These are the same old ones that have been around since the 30s. Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. Then we got Little Rosie, which I don't know what that is at all. And then ABC Weekend Special, whatever that was. Then at CBS, I won't sing the song because I've already done the Crash Bandicoot dance, but for an hour we got Muppet Babies, one of my all-time favorite cartoons. And then another hour of cartoons of an all-time great, Garfield and Friends. I absolutely love it. I mean, this is a lineup here. Next, we've got an hour, 2 episodes of, each one of these are 2 episodes, but it's an hour's worth. Next, we've got an hour, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, talk about the hits here. And then we got Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. Didn't like the movie, never watched the cartoon. Pee-wee's Playhouse. I was not a Pee-wee's Playhouse type person. Like, I'd seen a few episodes. I know from the 80s and early 90s, people are like, that's their all-time favorite. I'm not saying it's bad. I never, I caught a few episodes here and there, but don't really remember too much about it other than Paul Rubens as Pee-wee Herman just going nuts all the time. Dink the Little Dinosaur. Don't remember that one. And then CBS Story Break to end it. Then over on Fox, at 8 o'clock, we've got Peter Pan and the Pirates, which I just seen an episode of that a few weeks ago on one of them long 10-hour blocks on YouTube where they put Saturday morning cartoons. I actually was seeing an episode of that. It's the first time I think I'd ever seen it. Then at 8:30 we got my favorite one in the original Fox Kids cartoon, Bobby's World, with of course the voice of Howie Mandel. He created the show too, I believe. Great cartoon. Then at 9 we got an hour of Tom and Jerry Kids, which is obviously Tom and Jerry as kids. That was another thing that they like to do. The Flintstone Kids, and take the cartoon and add kids to it and make them as kids. Hey, it worked. And then at 10, I just seen the other day, the first time I'd ever seen it, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I had the song on my computer because it was on, if you guys ever listen to Music Choice on cable, they have their Sounds of the Season. Time of Halloween. I don't have cable anymore, so I missed Music Choice Sounds of the Season. But a lot of my Halloween music I've have on my playlist now, I have because of that channel. But anyway, this is one of the songs, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I think it was from a movie, but this is the cartoon, and it's just nuts. It's literally Killer Tomatoes. And then Pittsburgh Pigs. I don't know. Don't get me started on Pittsburgh freaking Steelers, but I don't know what the Pittsburgh Pigs are. Now, NBC, okay, see, this is when they were still good. Later on, starting in the early 90s, but really towards the mid and late 90s, NBC would get on this kick where all these other networks cater to the younger kids and the preteens. We're going to cater to the teenagers. And they started putting older teenager shows on. Saved by the Bell, The New Class, which I didn't care for. I like Saved by the Bell, which will be on here. But I didn't care for The New Class. And NBA inside stuff. I didn't care for basketball. But anyway, that's on here too, I see. But anyway, NBC at this time was still catering to kids on Saturday mornings, which they should have. First we got Camp Candy. I remember watching that, obviously based on John Candy. And then at 8:30 we've got Captain N and the Adventures of Super Mario Bros. 3. Of course, Captain N was, meant to be Captain Nintendo. And the Adventures of Super Mario Brothers 3 was a cartoon based on that. It made my top 50 Saturday morning cartoon list. A bunch of these I've talked about have, but I just happened to mention, if you want to go to my bonus episode, top 50 Saturday morning cartoons. I have a top 50 Nickelodeon episodes too, I think. I think it's 50 or 40. I can't remember. Watch the thing. You can tell I've been doing this for a while. I can't even remember what I've done already. But, yeah, The Adventures of Super Mario Brothers 3 is a funny cartoon. Rick Moranis and Gravedale High. I don't remember that at all. Of course, I know Rick Moranis. You know, he was in the Ghostbusters and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Little Giants. But, you know, I don't remember that, if it's a cartoon or show at all. Then we got Kid and Play. Never watched that. Chipmunks Go to the Movies, which was Alvin and the Chipmunks' later seasons of that, you know, 80s cartoon. They would just, like, doing, like, movie scenes and stuff. Playing out, like, movie scenes. And, you know, they just call it Chipmunks Go to the Movies. It was a fun cartoon. Then 11, we got Saved by the Bell. 11:30 is Roomies. I don't know what that is. Then we got Saturday Morning Videos, which I'm assuming are, like, pop music videos, but I'm not exactly sure. And then NBA Inside stuff. So, yay for that. But, I gotta get a drink of my Dragon Fruit Mountain Dew here. Next up is our Nickelodeon lineup for the same day. And of course, when I do these, I start at midnight, and of course that means Nick at Night. So we've got Bewitched, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, The Patty Duke Show, My Three Sons, The Donna Reed Show. Then we get to one I liked, Mr. Ed. I freaking love Mr. Ed. That show was so hilarious. Then we got another episode of Bewitched. My computer will go here. Dragnet, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, a great show. It barely missed making my top 10 horror anthology, only because I don't remember like a single episode, because I was never able to sit, you know, obviously at this time it was on 4 in the morning. I wasn't awake then. Nowadays, 4 in the morning, it's like, well, I might go to bed. But not then. So I didn't get much chance to actually watch these. I need to sit down and watch them. That's why I didn't make my top 10 list, you know. Not because it wasn't a good show, it's just because I don't have memories of it, and I don't want to be like, oh, this was a good episode, and then research what the episode was about, because I don't know. You know, I don't want to lie. Then we got America Tonight. Don't know what that is. The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, My Three Sons. And at 6, we start Nickelodeon off with Lassie. Can't go wrong with that. Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. Never heard of that. Then we got one that's marked with Cable in the Classroom, because, you know, when they were in school, that used to be a big thing, Cable in the Classroom, where they would show some stuff during school, you know, if the school wanted to show it. You know, obviously, if you grew up during my time period, not every school had it, but if you remember Channel 1, we didn't watch that in elementary school, but when we got to middle school is when we first discovered Channel 1, and it was pretty cool. But, you know, anyway, this is 7 o'clock was Eureka's Castle. Great show. I love all the puppets in it. Created by R.L. Stine, I found out later on. Like, he created a lot of the stuff on the show. And, of course, this was right before Goosebumps came out. Goosebumps came out the next year. Then we got Kids Court, which is a version of, like, the People's Court, but with the kids, obviously, it's not that anything serious. Then we've got Count Duckula, another Looney Tunes offshoot. A cartoon that the Orange Cat I prefer to Garfield, Heathcliff, which, like I said, I don't have a problem with Garfield. I love Garfield, but I always loved Heathcliff more. Then we got an hour of Inspector Gadget, one of the all-time greatest things. Of course, growing up, seeing this on Nickelodeon first, before seeing it on Saturday morning cartoons, which had already been on, I always thought Inspector Gadget was a Nickelodeon show. Turns out it was, you know, originally on, like, I think CBS on Saturday morning cartoons. But then we've got, let's slap a Nickelodeon logo on this. Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear, which is just the old Yogi Bear cartoons with the Nickelodeon logo. Then at 11, a show called Think Fast. I've never heard of that. And then we've got Skate TV, you know, the early 90s when skateboarding was starting to become a thing. Of course, this is before the Tony Hawk game and stuff, but, you know, it was starting to become a thing. Then we've got an hour of Dennis the Menace, the cartoon. I think it was the cartoon. That or the TV show. But I remember both. I love the cartoon. Then we've got an hour of Lassie. Then we've got the special delivery shows, because it's Saturday on Nickelodeon. They did these a lot, where it would be like not the original not regular series, but like movies or short movies. For a half hour, we got this short movie called The Lady and the Lion, which is just basically it's like a story, but it's in a half-hour format. You know, where it's not an ongoing show like something like Inspector Gadget would be. You know, it's like a standalone. Then we've got Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, Rapunzel, which is like, of course, a spin on Rapunzel. Then we got, for an hour, we got the Hunchback of Notre Dame, obviously not the Disney version, which I don't remember if it had come out yet. If it had, it was new, but maybe that's why they were showing that. But yeah, that's just because a lot of things like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, they're all in the public domain. It's just Disney obviously did the more popular versions of these. But yeah, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Then we got You Can't Do That on Television. Love that show. It's one of the first Nickelodeon shows, the variety show. It's where Nickelodeon Slime came from. Out of Control. I don't remember that at all. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Wizard's World. Of course, my heyday of watching Nickelodeon was a couple years later when I was watching it all the time. I remember Mr. Wizard's World was on 6 in the morning right before you go to school. But it was on at 5 right here. I love it. Then we got Family Double Dare, my favorite version of Double Dare. Wild and Crazy Kids, that great variety show meets game show meets field day at school, you know, activities outside. Shut up, ESPN. I know they're doing activities outside. I didn't say sports, although a lot of it was sports-based. Welcome Freshman, I never really got into that show. Then we got Inspector Gadget again. And then Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. And then since it's Saturday, this is before SNCC happened. This is either the year before or 2 years before. I think SNCC started in 92, maybe 93. But anyway, we end the day with a half hour of Looney Tunes on Nick at Night. So another Looney Tune rebranding. But then at 8:30, we go back to the Nick at Night schedule. We got Bewitched, Get Smart, Dragnet, Alfred Hitchcock Presents again, Green Acres, oh no. I say that because that freaking Green Acres song, I've said it before on here, it gets in my head every single day. I think during the last year there's been literally 2 days only that song hasn't been in my head. And today's not one of them because it's going into my head now. Thank you. The best of Saturday Night Live, which I didn't even care for that Saturday Night Live, sorry. Then we end with Whatever the Hell Is America Tonight. Still, I've seen that on this list many times. I still don't know what it is. Maybe I'll look it up one day. I try to not look up anything while I'm doing this, but if I do, I try to keep it to just one thing. And I've already looked up The Undertaker's debut. But now we're gonna talk about some sports. I'm not a huge basketball fan, as I just explained with the NBA Inside stuff, but some really big basketball news is going on. The NBA Finals, which is their their Super Bowl, the finals, I don't know if that includes the whole playoffs or just the final game, but they call them the finals because, it's a series. Unlike the Super Bowl is one game. The World Series is the World Series. But anyway, the Chicago Bulls won the NBA Finals. It was their first title, first of 3 in a row. And, of course, they'd end up going on to win even more. But this was their first of the 3 in a row. Michael Jordan's named the MVP of the finals, and it was his first appearance in the finals. But this is the start of the Chicago Bulls explosion of the 90's, and of course Michael Jordan's huge rise to fame, and of course he'd go on to be Space Jam and be like the most well-known, greatest basketball player of all time. But like I said, I wasn't really into basketball, so sorry I don't have more news on here on the NBA for NBA fans. It's just, I like it as a sport itself. It's just, I don't know, I've never really gotten into it. Maybe if I did, but then again, the basketball season goes on for so long, and I watch all of football, I watch all of baseball. It's like, I need a little bit of a break in between, when baseball is ending now, because I've been watching, I'm not glad it's over. Well, I guess I am because the Reds aren't in it. But, I've been just watching, I don't just watch the Reds games. I'll watch all games, not every day, but most days. And it's the same with football. And it's like, you get a little bit of time. I need a couple days off here and there from baseball, just because I've been consuming so much of it. But anyway, speaking of baseball, we're in June, so at the end of the month, we're halfway through the season. The leaders after the end of the month for the National League were the Pirates and the Dodgers. This is back when there was 2 divisions, the West and the East, in each league, and only 4 teams made the playoffs. The Pirates and the Dodgers, like I said, were the leaders for the National League. My team, the Reds, were in second in the West. We were only 4 games back, but we ended up collapsing, ended up 20 games back, not even close to the playoffs. And this was the year after we swept the A's in the World Series and won. The Braves would end up making a big run later in the year, and they would, I should say that leaders for the AL were the Blue Jays and the Twins, but the Braves would end up making a huge run. They'd end up winning the National League, but then would lose in the World Series to the Twins. So Twins were the World Series champions that year. Players of the month for June, definitely Reds great, Barry Larkin, Reds and Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Barry Larkin, shortstop. He was the player of the month for the NL, and the AL player of the month was Joe Carter, played for the Blue Jays. Pitchers of the month, another Reds connection, Rob Dibble, one of the Nasty Boys. He was pitcher of the month, and then Jack Morris for the Twins was pitcher of the month for the American League. And this was also the year that the National League voted to award franchises to 2 teams. They ended up going to Miami, Florida, which become the Marlins. First they were the Florida Marlins, and then they become the Miami Marlins. And they also awarded a franchise to Denver, Colorado, which would be the Rockies, which is one of my favorite teams, but they're not very good, sadly. I remember the 90's, though. We got these Colorado Rockies jerseys, like these black with purple on them. Just some of my all-time favorite things. Like, we got the full jersey and pants, so we'd wear them outside all the time. Even though I was mostly a Reds fan, it was like I like the Rockies too, and basically that's where my love of the Rockies came from. I definitely wouldn't pick them over the Reds, and truthfully, I probably wouldn't pick them to beat even a minor league team these days. Hopefully, they can finally get some good players and get a winning season at least. But anyway, those cities got the franchises, and those would actually start in 1993. But some others, the cities that they beat out were a couple in Florida, Orlando and St. Petersburg. Of course, Tampa Bay would end up getting what's called the Rays now. They were the Devil Rays then. And they beat Washington, D.C., which, of course, now has the Nationals. When the Expos moved from Montreal, Canada, they became the Nationals because, they're called the Expos. I still don't even know what that means. They're just exporting them? They're exposing somebody? I don't know what it means. I'm sure it meant something in Montreal. And the other one they beat out was Buffalo, New York, because good. They don't need 3 baseball teams in New York. They already got enough. They already got the Mets and the Yankees. We already got the Buffalo Bills. They didn't need the Buffalo whatever the hell they were going to be. But we'll talk about NASCAR now. Sorry, I'm taking forever on this podcast, as always. They seem to get longer and longer, and I'm trying to make them shorter, but I talk about stuff. That's the whole point of this. If you watch it, hopefully you enjoy it. If it's too long, let me know. Maybe I'll try to find a way to shorten it. Just let me know what kind of content you guys want, because I'm making this for everybody, not just me to go blah, 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 all day. But NASCAR news. Ken Schrader won the Budweiser 500 at Dover. And Davey Allison won the 2nd and the 4th races of the month. He won the Banquet Frozen Foods 300 at Sonoma. Funny name there. The Banquet Frozen Foods. But that's the road course race. And then he won the Miller Genuine Draft 400 at Michigan International Speedway. Still don't know why they call it International Speedway when it's in Michigan. I mean, it's not like the Speedway stretches up to Canada. It's not international. It's just national. Just to add importance, I guess. And then Darrell Waltrip won the Champion Spark Plug 500 at Pocono. And, of course, this is the year Dale Earnhardt ended up winning his 5th NASCAR championship. Later, of course, at the end of November when, the last race. NASCAR has a long season. They go from about middle February, sometimes early February, till, end of November. Easily the longest run in sports. All right, now I've been debating when to not do a full video about my dad, because that would take forever, and I know I've already gone almost an hour already. But debating on when to talk about him, not super long, but just as a feature in this video, or in my podcast, and because I talked about my grandma Lois, his mom, the month and year she died, which is actually October of 1991. This year I'm talking about. She only had a couple months to live during this. Of course, I didn't know it then. I don't know if they knew it or anything. I didn't know much about any of that. But I know she was in bad health by this point. But last week I talked about her husband, my dad's dad, Grandpa Wally, because it was a February episode. It's try to find when they actually, people in my family have died, to do like a tribute to them. It's kind of hard if they didn't die in the 90s to try to find where they fit in. And I think I'm going to talk about him this episode because just because it's June and his birthday was June. He was born June 1949. And I will be talking about my Uncle Dan, his brother, in 99 when he died, and the role, and I'll talk a little bit in a minute, the role him dying played in me and my dad reconnecting. But I don't want anybody to think that I don't care about or love my mom's mom and dad, Granny and Papa Jesse, because that's definitely not the case. It's just I haven't had the opportunity to talk about them yet. I will be talking about my Papa Jesse when he died he died in 1998. I'll be talking about him in one of those episodes, and my granny didn't die until the 2000s. So the next episode I do on March, which was her birthday, I will talk about her at length. But so I didn't want anybody to think like, oh, you didn't care about your other grandparents, because trust me, there's, I'm not saying, oh, these grandparents are better than the others, but because I don't ever pick favorites like that. But both my sets of grandparents were very special to me, and I don't want anybody to think I'm leaving one out over the other, just because I talked about my dad's mom and dad already, and but I've in my episodes I've always kind of touched on all of them, like when a memory comes up. But like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad. He was born June of 1949. He was in the U.S. Army. He was military police. He served as security for a while downtown at the I forget what it's called now. It's been a million things. The Crown, U.S. Bank Arena, but it was the building that's mostly known as Riverfront Coliseum, which is right next to Riverfront Stadium, the Reds and the Bengals stadium at the time. Of course, now they have Great American Ballpark and whatever Paycor Field it's called now. It used to be Paul Brown Stadium. But yeah, my dad was security there for the longest time. Then during the Big Red Machine run in the 70s, he was security there. He told me stories all the time about him talking every day with Pete Rose and the players. Just like great stories. But yeah, he was it's hard to try to talk about him and not do like a 9 freaking hour video. So I would just talk about basically during this time period, I was still going over there to visit with him, but we'd obviously moved out. At this time, I was living with my mom in Mount Carmel. Or not Mount Carmel, we were living with Granny in Newtown. Granny and Papa Jesse, her mom and dad. We were living there, but I would still go over there. I don't know if it was every weekend or every other weekend. Grandpa Wally would come and get me, or Papa Jesse would take me over there. It'd be like a back and forth thing. But it wasn't much longer, a couple years later, that due to stepdad Marky Foe, which I've talked about 1,000 times on here, ended up, starting a fight with him, accusing him of being drunk while he was babysitting me and my brother Josh and Travis, accusing him of being drunk. Meanwhile, Marky Foe's drunk every second of his life. But anyway, wouldn't let him come back over, and my dad ended up moving to Indiana with my sisters who'd lived here, because that's where their mom and the man she married moved. So they ended up moving to Indiana too, obviously, and then he ended up moving out here, and we lost contact for a long time, and due to I wasn't allowed to see him, and him moving to Indiana, it's just, you know, it was very, you know, I was consumed in my own personal hell of living with the abuse of Marky Foe that I really wasn't like why doesn't my dad talk to me, or, you know, I miss him. You know, I was so consumed in just trying to live day by day and not piss this piece of crap off that I didn't really think much about my dad, you know, which I feel horrible saying now. You know, it wasn't like I hated him or anything like that. It's just, you know, didn't have much, you know, time to think about him, and, you know, I wasn't even allowed to see Grandpa Wally or Uncle Dan. Tried talking about my dad and ended up talking more about Marky Foe and his crap. Sorry, I'll get over that now. Anyway, I ended up reconnecting with my dad when my Uncle Dan died, which is a horrible way to, like, you know, I'm not glad at all my Uncle Dan died, because, you know, I loved him. It was my dad's closest brother. I'm going to talk about the other one. I talked about him last week, how Tim, I'm going to call him Uncle, how he didn't notify anybody when Grandpa Wally died. The piece of... Sorry. Trying to make this not negative piece, but it's just coming out that way. But anyway, they'd gotten a hold of Granny. This was after we'd moved to Norwood, after leaving Marky Foe. When my mom moved to Norwood with Steve, my two younger sisters' dads, ended up getting a hold of Granny because her number had been the same forever. 513, not to do 513 then, but 231-6367 was her number. I remember our number in Norwood, 242-2723. Funny how, and we only lived there like 5 or 6 years, but it's funny how you remember phone numbers from childhood. Maybe I should try to call them one day. I don't know. I did a series where I called, I haven't released any of the videos yet, where I called like old 800 numbers and mostly got life alert things and automated things. This number's not in business. I have a feeling if I called a local number, it'd be somebody's house, and I don't want to get in trouble. But anyway, my dad ended up calling there to, you know, say Uncle Dan died, and, you know, my mom took me to the funeral, which is the same funeral home that Grandma Lois was at, Raydell's, which they tore down recently. They were trying to save it as like a historical place, because it really was a historical place, but they're tearing it down for some Boys and Girls Club, which they could have built anywhere else. I'm not saying they don't need a Boys and Girls Club, or if that's what it is, one of them type places, but they could have built it anywhere else. Good luck getting haunted there. Anyway, yeah, that was the first time I'd seen my dad in 5 or 6 years, maybe even 7 at that point. But yeah, we reconnected and then ended up living together, and, you know, just some of my greatest memories of life come from him, whether it's watching horror movies, and again, I'm trying to condense here to fit in a small episode. At some point, I'm going to do an episode on my family that probably only 4 people will watch, but that's fine. But yeah, all the horror movies I like, you know, I got my love from him. My love of music and just singing in general, I got from him. He was in a band, you know, obviously nothing that went like famous or anything, but it could have been. I think he could have been if he would have, you know, not been drinking as much, and, you know, you're really focused on that. But, you know, he had me to support, and he had, you know, my 3 sisters. I think they were, when I was, you know, young, I think they were still all teenagers. I'm not exactly sure if my oldest had been an adult yet. I bad with math sometimes. As the years go by, it's harder to keep track of whose age was what. But yeah, he could have been a musician. I mean, he was a musician. He could have been famous, I think. He was that good. But like later years, we reconnected. You know, me being the rebellious teenager that I was, and the reason I had to go live with him anyways, you know, my mom basically said, you know, you got to go move here, you know, because I was just going crazy. It seemed like I wasn't doing drugs or anything, but if I'd, you know, had that in me to do drugs, I probably would have been doing all kinds of drugs too. I was just acting out, you know, all the time. So she sent me there to live because she couldn't deal with me anymore. And I don't blame her at all for that. And it was actually a good thing, but I still had that rebellious side in me that, you know, me and my dad would get to arguing about things, and not even be important things, but, you know, kills me to think about later on, because this was 99 and he died in 2006. So, you know, like we argued every day, and that ended up stopping once I freaking wised up and grew up. But I still hate that happened. With as little time as we got together, and I acted like, and it was completely my fault, just acting like an idiot about things. I don't even remember exact details. It's just I not just trying to, oh, my dad's dead, so I'm gonna, nothing ever happened wrong, but all 99% of our arguing and stuff was just completely my fault. But we had some great times together. Some of those memories from when it was me, him, and Grandpa Wally were living in I talked about last week, the small apartment where I was living half out of the thing. My dad, when he stayed there, he was living in between there and Indiana. He was going back and forth, especially when his health started getting bad. He'd have to be in Cincinnati to stay, to go to the VA hospital, and sometimes I would go with him on the bus. But I'll get into that in just a couple seconds. But some of my favorite moments were there. He would sleep in the recliner. My grandpa would sleep in his bed, and I would sleep in the closet. But we'd watch TV together and stuff. Watch the Bengals games and the Reds games and the Ohio State games. That's where I became an Ohio State fan because of my dad. I wish these tapes still existed. These cassette tapes of we would just be. I'd have one of those tape players that would have a recorder. A little microphone on the stand. Not like this type of thing. Just a little line that says mic on it, and it's built into the player. Well, I would play CDs off of the Grandpa CD player, and my dad would just come up with his own lines, and just some of the songs today, a lot of it was to Merle Haggard songs, because he got this Merle Haggard collection of all his greatest hits, and so it was mostly to that stuff, and he would freaking come up with the most off-the-wall stuff. And sometimes when I hear these songs now, because I have the exact same collection too, so it's the same versions, I'll be doing line for line what my dad did back in 2002, 2003, and still remember exactly what he said. I wish those tapes still existed. That would be, I don't remember what happened to them, but that, and when I moved to, off the topic of my dad for a second, when I would later on move in with my mom again after my Grandpa Wally. I told that story last week where I had to move out. Uncle Tim, I don't want to call him Uncle again, but Tim made him move in with him, and I had to move back to my mom's. Well, we did this thing called the Marky Foe Radio Show, where we would just do parodies of songs just like I did with my dad, but me and my brothers would do this, and we would just pretend to call in as guests and just go crazy with this stuff. I wish those tapes still existed too. Man, that would be some classic stuff. I would definitely be playing that for you guys to hear. But yeah, just those parodies. And then my dad started having health problems, and then he was a veteran, so he went to the VA because he didn't have health insurance at the time. But it ended up getting so bad, he ended up all said and done, had several fingers and both legs amputated. But I remember during the first amputation, of course, he went to stay with my sister afterwards, after he'd gotten back. But I remember they gave him disability. It's oh, you don't have a leg, I'll finally give you disability. But they ended up giving him this huge back check. And the type of man my dad was, I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again anyway, I don't care. He could have spent all that money on whatever he wanted to, but he gave $1,000 to each of his kids. At least I think he gave $1,000 to everybody. I know he gave me $1,000. I'm pretty sure he gave that, or it might have been more to my sisters because they were growing up and maybe had more bills. I don't know exactly for sure. I'm not saying they got more than me. I don't care if they did. I was $1,000. I went nuts with it, of course, being 20 years old. Stupidly, I should have saved it better. But that's the type of person he was. He could have spent it all on himself. He could have been selfish, but no, he didn't even give it a second thought. And just that's the one memory I always in my head of just how he was. And he was a complete opposite of Marky Foe. He wasn't verbally abusive. He wasn't mentally abusive. He wasn't physically abusive. the few times he's reacted in anger almost scared me. It was like, oh my God, I've never seen him act like this before. The times that I made him mad, which really made me feel mad. But yeah, sadly he died in 2006. Congestive heart failure, basically due to diabetes and the having amputated and just heart disease because of everything. Just that's a rough one to think about. But usually it'll be 20 years next year. It's been 19 years. It just happened in September. That he's been gone, and mostly when I think of him, it's always happy thoughts nowadays. I've gotten to that point where I was bad off for a while, but it's gotten to the point where it's mostly good memories now. So that's where I want to leave it, is the good memories of thinking of him and how generous he was and how freaking funny he was, and make up so many stories. I've told some of them before. So I'm gonna leave it right there for now. I'll definitely not the last time I'm talking about my dad. But I want to talk about some kids' meal toys. Of course, Happy Meal's the one everybody thinks of predominantly. The Happy Meal toy this month for June of 1991, remind you where we're at, so I'm talking about all these dates and stuff, was McDino Changeables. These were I remember these. I don't think I ever had one, but I remember seeing them. They were like the shake and the fries, those little toys where they would sometimes open up. Well, these would actually fold out and become dinosaurs somehow. Those are so cool. I always wanted one, never got them. Burger King, of course, they had their kids club. They were trying to establish themselves as a kids meal. Couldn't call it Happy Meal, but they came out with the Burger King Kids Club. But they had the Burger King Kids Club Water Mates, which would have the members of the kids clubs, and I don't remember their names individually. I can picture them, but I can't remember their names. But on different watercrafts, and even one of them had a dolphin that they were riding on. And then Wendy's had the Summer Fun Sun Gear, which a lot of restaurants would do sometimes in the summer, come out with summer toys. You typically have your action figures or your cars or your some place would have the boys would get cars, the girls would get dolls, or you would have your puzzles or certain different things. Because I've done a lot of these kids meal things over time, so I've noticed patterns that you don't really notice at the time. But yeah, McDonald's had these toys that folded out into dinosaurs. Burger King had again action figures on little vehicles, and Wendy's had summer toys. That's typically your prototypical Happy Meal toys there. Wrestling, there was actually no pay-per-view this month. There was a WCW Clash of the Champions I'm going to talk about at the time, but there was one wrestling pay-per-view for a company I've never talked about before. And just doing the research and just over the years of hearing stories, this company sucked. UWF, Universal Wrestling Federation. They had their one and only pay-per-view, Beach Brawl. Drew only 500 people, and it was a 4,000-seat arena in Palmetto, Florida on June 9th. And the company would have one final TV special, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it was a company founded by Herb, or I think it's Herb Abrams. some crackhead. He was his dad had a clothing store, and that's how he got money, and he ran a clothing store for plus size women. And you think of all the names you could give a store. The store is called I'm a Big Girl Now. Really? This thing probably went out of business as fast as they got the sign up. But anyway, apparently he had enough money to start a wrestling company, and even got a $1 million deal with Sports Channel America, which was trying to be like ESPN, but it was more of a regional thing. It ended up getting merged, and basically is what Fox Sports became, and now Bally Sports or whatever it is, FanDuel I think is what it's called now, until they rename it again. But anyway, their last show was called Blackjack Brawl. It was a TV special that was even worse than this show. It was filmed at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and that holds about 17,000 people. How many tickets do you think they sold? A few thousand? No, 300 tickets. That show was horrible, but this guy ended up getting arrested in July of 1996. He was found naked and covered in baby oil in his office, smashing up things with a baseball bat. Try not to laugh too much, because he ended up later dying that day in the hospital, and they found cocaine and Valium in his system. Big shock probably loads of cocaine, but I mean, this guy was nuts. And had no mind for wrestling, because this was a crappy show. They had a street fight between Terry Gordy and Johnny Ace. Well, there's your first clue right there. You're booking Johnny Ace. Oh, Mr. John Laurinaitis. Pervert idiot. Anyway, the street fight ended up in a double countout. How the hell do you have a countout in a street fight? I know a lot of people like street fight. Well, it's supposed to, it's weird in WWE street fights are different than. There's the Power Rangers. I knew the Green Ranger would be going off. Anyway, in WWE's rules were a street fight, you can do anything, but the pins have to take place in the ring, which I always thought was stupid. But having a...
You've got mail.
I'm getting all kinds of things. Having a street fight in a count out is just
You've got mail.
idiotic. I know AOL. This idiot should have got mail not to be on crack. Crackhead would have visited him. But, Rockin' Robin defeated Candy Divine to win a match for the first UWF Women's Championship. Whoop-de-doo on that one. The main event, Dr. Death Steve Williams defeated Bam Bam Bigelow in the finals of a tournament to win the first ever UWF Sports Channel TV Championship. Just a horrible show. Panned across the board. It had an interview segment with Captain Lou Albano. His guests were the Blackhearts and Luna Vachon. They got in the ring. He literally said, "I hate these people," dropped the microphone and left. I don't know if that was a shoot or if that was supposed to be part of the interview. I don't know. He hates those people. I hate that show. I've never actually seen it. That'd be a funny one to watch, because I guarantee it's got to be even more horrible than the description. But like I said, no WCW, no WWF pay-per-views. ECW didn't exist at the time. But WCW did have their Clash of the Champions, which was their big TV special once every month or 2 months, 3 months, depending on when they wanted to do it, on TBS. It was called Knoxville, USA, from Knoxville, Tennessee. It was June 12th. They had a loser of the fall leaves WCW match where, normal loser leaves whatever company they have to leave. Well, it's a tag team match, so whoever got pinned or submitted left. It was Arn Anderson and Barry Windham taking on Brian Pillman and El Gigante, become what's his name, Giant Gonzalez from everything I've heard, nice guy but horrible wrestler, terrible wrestler. Anyway, of all those, Brian Pillman ends up losing, but he ends up coming back under a mask as the Yellow Dog. WCW at this time period was not the best. Jim Herd ran it, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the main event was a 2 out of 3 falls match for the WCW World Heavyweight title. Champion Ric Flair retained the title. He defeated Bobby Eaton 2 falls out of 3. And this would actually be Ric Flair's last Clash of the Champions for a couple years because of the whole Jim Herd situation and leaving and taking the title with him. And the whole company should have left that idiot, but then it wouldn't exist today. Jim Herd sucked. Pizza Hut guy, executive, thinks he can be a wrestling executive. Did not work out. Nobody liked working for him. I've never found one positive interview by anybody that ever worked there for him, so it's bad then. But talk about some fast food innovations that Taco Bell was trying. We go from wrestling to Taco Bell. Well, actually, before we get to that, I should mention that there was a couple other title changes that month for WCW. Stunning Steve Austin defeated WCW World TV Champion Bobby Eaton on June 3rd, WCW Worldwide. And then June 30th, the Fabulous Freebirds, which was Brad Armstrong as Bad Street under a mask, Jimmy Garvin and Michael Hayes, defeated the not super long but kind of short-lived WCW 6-man tag team champions Junkyard Dog, Ricky Morton, and Tommy Rich to win the titles. Yeah, this 6-man tag team was they have a ton of 6-man tag teams now, but it's always storyline based. It's never dedicated teams to where they'd need a championship. Hopefully they don't bring those titles back. It'd be complete overkill. But anyway, like I said, we're going to talk about fast food. Taco Bell was definitely trying to experiment. They came up with a Taco Bell Express at smaller places like gas stations, malls, airports, where you get a limited menu. But they were also trying other things have you heard of the ATM? It's not the one you're thinking of. literally automated taco machine. Okay, they came out with this machine where it can make tacos like as quick as 4 seconds, and it could pump out like 900 tacos an hour, I think it said. Obviously, it never took off, but most people that had them said that they, they were like normal tacos. There wasn't anything weird about them. It's just strange that they would come out with this machine. But with the way the world's going now, it would have definitely, it was a little ahead of its time, maybe too far ahead of its time. But another thing that they were trying at the time was definitely, something that we see now all over, is touchscreen ordering, which of course, nowadays you can go in restaurants, especially McDonald's, and you can just order off a freaking touchscreen thing right there. You don't even have to go up to the counter to get the stuff. I mean, you have to go up there and get it, unless they deliver it to your table or something. But yeah, just that stuff was definitely ahead of its time. Yeah, and then another innovation they were coming out with just to make things faster was they started getting pre-seasoned and pre-cooked beef, and then like chopped up vegetables, or stuff arriving by bag. And it definitely, Taco Bell's food definitely took a hit in quality there, because you just can't beat fresh cooked meat, which it would, depending on how it was made and seasoned and everything. Some Taco Bells may taste different than other Taco Bells. Some may do it better than others, but they're trying to get everything all the same, which I get for a franchise restaurant. You want that quality to be the same throughout, but and you want the efficiency of having the meat already cooked, so you just heat it up. But you kind of lose the human element there. But that's the way fast food's been for a while, and it's never going back to the other way. They're not just gonna start making their own food from scratch at all these places. And Burger King came out with a couple desserts this month. Kool-Aid Cool Pumps, which were basically like sherbet style ice cream in like a push-up form. They were basically Flintstone push pops, just using Kool-Aid flavors instead. And they also came out with Snickers ice cream bars, which of course they would never have like ice cream bars nowadays. These restaurants, that'd be too much to deal with. It's just throw some ice cream in a cup, give it a fancy name, throw some toppings in there, or a shake version of it, or whatever. But we're almost done with our episode. I do want to talk about a couple things in TV news. I've never watched these channels, so I didn't know them. But apparently there was a Ha network, not AHA, but Ha as in haha network, and the Comedy Channel. They merged to become a channel called CTV, the Comedy Network. Well, apparently that was getting confused. That was a couple months earlier. It was getting confused with CTV, a Canadian channel. So they rebranded it in June of 1991 to become a channel that I'm sure we all know and love these days, Comedy Central. That's where that came out of, is two comedy channels merging and then changing a name. But yeah, of course, ultimately known as like South Park is probably their biggest show ever, but they've had a ton of stuff on there. And it was also announced this month that Jay Leno would take over hosting the Tonight Show on NBC permanently from Johnny Carson. He'd been like a guest host. Johnny Carson hadn't been doing as many episodes. They'd have several guest hosts, which ended up being like basically like tryouts. But they announced in next year that Jay Leno would take over. And I never watched during the heyday of the Tonight Show, like with Jay Leno, like the mid-90s when he was doing all the Clinton jokes at first. I started watching with my grandpa when he was watching it, because it was late night and I was either sleeping or just watching something else. I wasn't watching the Tonight Show during that time, but I've seen some of the episodes since, and Jay Leno is hilarious. Just all his segments too. The headlines, of course, is the best, but the jaywalking ones where he go interview people. He was such a great host. If he was still doing it again, I'd be watching late night TV again, not these idiots they got on now. And I ain't talking about all the political stuff that happened recently and everything. I'm just talking, none of them are funny to me at all. Like, I don't care what political things they talk about, it's just none of them are funny to me. I haven't watched the Tonight Show or any late night talk show TV since Jay Leno retired the second time. He retired the first time and they brought Conan O'Brien, which is the most unfunniest guy of history, and that didn't work, so they brought Jay Leno back, but then they forced him out again. Should have kept him. He's still hilarious, I guarantee. But the last thing I want to talk about this week for this month is music. Of course, we go into the charts, the Billboard Hot 100, which I was not listening to this music at all. Number one for 1 week, and also a week back in May, so 2 weeks total, was Mariah Carey's song, I Don't Want to Cry. And yes, they got Mariah Carey thawing out for Christmas around this time, because I'm filming this in October. So they got her thawing out for her Christmas song already, apparently. Number one for a week was More Than Words by Extreme. And I only know that song, or More Than Words, that part, because they play that during that Monster Ballad CD that they always had on sale in the 90s, a commercial they always played. And that's all, the only part of that song they played. The only part of the song I know. It sounds boring. I don't know. Maybe the rest of the song is exciting. It went to number one for a week. And then a song called Rush Rush by Paula Abdul, which I was never a fan of. It was number one for 3 weeks and 2 weeks the following month, so 5 weeks total. But my favorite music, country music, American Country Countdown. Diamond Rio had just came out with their debut song Meet in the Middle, and it went to number one for 2 weeks. There's a rare thing in country then for a debut song to go to number one, so that's how you knew that they had it made. And Diamond Rio's a great band. I've seen them live once. So I love their freaking harmonies. It's one of my all-time favorites. A song that I didn't really like and didn't really realize it went to number one was a Joe Diffie song called If the Devil Danced in Empty Pockets. Now, I love most of Joe Diffie's songs. That was one of the few songs I didn't like. I don't know, just something about it never hit me right. But it went to number one, so some people liked it, obviously. Like I said, it's just one of those songs, you have some artists sometimes where, they come out with the songs like, that's not my thing. That was it. It wasn't a bad song, it's just, But the next one was a major hit. It was only number one for 2 weeks, but back then, the country countdowns, there was a lot of competition, so it was rare to be a multi-week number one. Where in pop music, sometimes you get 12 weeks at number one that nobody bat an eye. But number one for 2 weeks was the Garth Brooks mega hit song, The Thunder Rolls, which I think ended up being his last single out, because Rope in the Wind, his third album, and the one that made him a giant superstar, was coming out in a couple months. I think this might have been his last song off there, but of course, one of the biggest, not the biggest off the album. I think the biggest off the album was probably Friends in Low Places, but The Thunder Rolls was huge, and of course the video caused all kinds of controversy. Got banned off of CMT and TNN because they had abuse in it and a woman shooting a guy. But they played it on MTV after the controversy, so Garth Brooks got played on MTV, which is kind of where people, the first instance of him crossing over, and people were like, oh, he's going pop. No, he's not going pop. They just played his music on there because country banned him because of the subject matter. Nowadays, that would be nothing. But they did have during this month the 25th annual TNN's Music City News Awards, which was their award show for TNN, the Nashville network. Entertainer of the Year was Ricky Van Shelton. He ended up beating out Garth Brooks, the Statlers, which they had a weird obsession with the Statler brothers. Later they become the Statlers because I can't remember his name. I can't think of his last name. Jimmy Fortune joined them after one of the Statler brothers died. Sorry, I can't think of their names. But so they were just one of the Statler brothers, the Statlers. But they had TNN had a weird obsession with them. Like I know they had the Grand Ole Opry on TNN, so they had them on there a lot, and it was like they weren't really they were making new music, but it wasn't getting played anywhere except on TNN. So they were always up, they were up for Entertainer of the Year. They were hardly touring or anything. It was not that they were bad, it's just they shouldn't have been considered for that award. Anyway, Ricky Van Shelton ended up beating out Garth Brooks, which of course this was pre his first TV special, so he wasn't superstar Garth Brooks, he was just star Garth Brooks. Statlers, George Strait, and Randy Travis. So, big win for Ricky Van Shelton. Album of the Year went to Here in the Real World, Alan Jackson, his first album, which actually came out in '89, which is kind of where this thing's going. I'll get to it later of who their star of tomorrow is. Male Artist of the Year went to Ricky Van Shelton. Of course, Entertainer of the Year. Usually, who wins that is usually the male or the female Artist of the Year. Female Artist of the Year, Reba McEntire. Definitely no problems with that one. Vocal group of the year. Here we go. The Statlers. They were not the vocal group of the year, okay? I'm not saying they had bad vocals. They had good vocals. It's just that I don't know. They had somebody at the network obviously was a huge fan or related to them. Vocal duo of the year, the Judds. Of course, they were on their way out. They were retiring. Wynonna would become a solo artist in a couple years, and Brooks and Dunn would come out next year and really take over that award in every award show. Single of the year, When I Call Your Name, Vince Gill, of course, with the Patty Loveless background vocals. Great song. Video of the year went to The Dance by Garth Brooks. That was a great video and a great song. Definitely no problems with that one. But the next one I have problem with, just because not even who they chose or the people on the list, just the time of it. The star of tomorrow they voted was Alan Jackson, who'd come out 2 years earlier and was already a superstar. And you want to know who his competition he beat out was? Like other people up for this award? Garth Brooks, okay? Same thing. Came out in '89 with Alan Jackson, was already a star. Carlene Carter I didn't really care for. But her and Doug Stone was another one. Should only been the only ones up for this award out of these people, because Travis Tritt was also up for this, and he came out in '89. Like, why didn't they have Clint Black? He came out in '89 too, just because he had a bunch of number ones before everybody else, I think. But I mean, star of tomorrow, already a star. They should save that for people that came out either that year or the year before, not people that have been out for 2 years. Anyway, vocal collaboration of the year was Lori Morgan and Keith Whitley. Till a Tear Becomes a Rose. Of course, that was released after Keith had died. Keith, I think, had done the vocals for it, and then I think Lori added hers on after he died, but a great song. A comedian of the year, Ray Stevens, can't go wrong with that. Didn't have a ton of comedians then, but later on you'd see Cletus T. Judd do the parodies. He's one of my all-time favorites. Instrumentalist of the year, which is musician of the year, whatever, what they call instrumentalist. They wanted to add some syllables. Was Vince Gill, and the Living Legend Award went to Tammy Wynette. And that's all we have for month. Sorry it was a long one. A lot of stuff to talk about. Next week, we're going to be going back even further in the time machine. We're going to go back to March of 1990, episode 52. This is going to be our 5th trip through 1990. I was 6 years old in kindergarten. And last time we were in 1990 was actually February, and I think I've done January. And have I done January of 1990? I don't think so. I might have. Let me check real quick. Nope. Yeah, because that'll be actually the earliest one I can do from the 90s, is January. But yeah, we're going to March of 1990, so pretty close to the earliest you can do. See what was going on in the world in March of 1990. If you got any comments or suggestions, leave them. Thank you for watching here on YouTube or Facebook or listening on Spotify or wherever else you may find us in the future. They might send it into space. They might send me into space to get rid of me. Anyway, I'll see you next time.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.